Amazing. All right. I am so excited to introduce our keynote speaker today. I have known Richard Florida for, I think, over 10 years. Again, forgive me, this joke is starting to get old, but I cold emailed him. He's one of my heroes. He is the author of Rise of the Creative Class, New Urban Crisis, arguably, I think without question, the most famous and influential urbanist in the world. He is an advisor to mayors, to governors. He has been a professor at the University of Toronto, at NYU, has been advising in Nashville and to Vanderbilt University for several years. There is nobody who understands the intersection of our economies and our communities more than this man. I also, we became friends over the years. We met really when I was at WeWork, and then after I left WeWork, I was at a startup, and COVID hit, and I like human beings, and I need to be around human beings. I'm in the middle of 5. My oldest sister Jessica, my older brother Connor, my little sister Charlie, my little sister Addison will all attest, I need to be around people, and we are a noisy bunch. And Richard and I started a podcast together called The Mayors, and it was amazing. We interviewed mayors from all across the country, and really we tried to do kind of like a How I Built This does with startups or with CEOs and entrepreneurs, but with mayors. But truth be told, this was just a trick so that I could hang out with Richard like once a week on Zoom, and then we would spend an hour and a half with mayors just having a great conversation. This guy is a rare mind. He has more insight into more communities than I think you will ever find in another person. So the fact that he has come here today, and he knows a lot. Actually, I get text messages from him about, do you see what's going on in Montana around this and this? He is obsessed with this state. I think probably a little bit because of our friendship, and he knows a lot about Bozeman and this broader community specifically. So if you will, let's give a big Montana welcome to Richard Florida.
Thank you, Broski. Thank you. Thank you, Padden. Thanks to Padden. Thanks to all the organizers. Thanks to my good buddy Mark Sharp, who runs the Innovation Campus. Thanks to the mayor, all the community leaders, and of course Maggie and the folks at JP Morgan Chase for supporting this. It's really interesting having my last name. I grew up Italian in New Jersey. I talk like this. How you doing? It's nice to be in Montana. And people teased me a lot. I was a tall, skinny kid. And they called me Richard Florida, Richard California a lot. But right behind there was Richard Montana. So I feel a special kinship for this state. What you have going on here is incredible. It brings great opportunities and great challenges. I think it's true that it's your moment, but it's your moment to steward and lead. And too many communities that are like yours end up talking about all the great things going on and not addressing their challenges. And you have, if you really love your city and love your community, you have to do both. I'll talk about that more. Look, what's happening here is truly amazing. The state's led the country in the growth in professional services, something that's really critical to the knowledge economy. You're growing in incredible high-tech, and not just high-tech, listening to those, not just classic high-tech, internet technology, digital, AI, bio, all of that stuff, advanced mobility with Aurora. You're building a kind of creative economy. That's what we just heard. These are creative companies, something I've read about. You've experienced 40% growth in the metro over the past decade, 50% growth in the city. And I want to talk to you a little bit about why. And it has to do with something I've called the creative class. and the kind of economic shift, but I listened very intently to those last conversations. And what did I hear? I heard about people searching for home in a kind of rootless world, right? What is home? Where do I live? Do I live in Brooklyn? Do I live in Boulder? Do I live, where? Well, maybe I come from Montana. You just listen to Patton, what he said about you. I think in a digitally connected, global, rootless world, the biggest question all of us are dealing with is, what is home? And I listened very intently to all those conversations about founders. It wasn't about, right, I teach in a freaking business school. We teach courses in entrepreneurship and how to make a business. That's bullshit. Bullshit. It's about contributing to your community. I wanted to contribute to community. I wanted to find a place that I could identify with that reflected who I am and where I could raise my kids. And some, like Patton, are fortunate enough to have family. Some of us move to new places. How do I build a community? How do I connect with people? Those are not questions my parents ever had to ask themselves. My dad worked in a factory in Newark, New Jersey. He started working there when he was at 13 during the Great Depression because there wasn't enough money. His dad and his mom, who worked in a bakery, were making. It took 7 siblings, and my dad, 6 siblings plus him, my grandma and grandpa to make enough, and they split the house they lived in Newark with my grandfather's 2 brothers. My dad worked, and he took care of his family. He had no friends. All he had was his family. He married 1 woman, lived in 1 house, worked in 1 job for life. And then I'm thrust into this. And I spent my life trying to figure out what is going on. Look, you are living through the greatest economic, social, technological shift in all of human history before us. For most of our time, we made our money by extracting things from the ground. Montana. Or we lived on farms. Most of us, 95% of us for most of human history did that. We have time to worry about anything else. And then the Industrial Revolution came a couple centuries ago. And we started to build up these industrial manufacturing communities, Pittsburgh and Detroit and Cleveland and all the cities like that were part of this great industrial revolution. But still, we made our livelihoods. My parents made their livelihoods by basically taking physical labor, physical human strength, and matching that with raw materials. And something really strange happened over the past 2 or 3 decades. Now, these are facts. Less than 1% of Americans work on farms. Less than 20% of Americans do blue-collar work. They work with their hands, or they drive trucks, or they're involved in logistics, or they build things. They're involved in construction. 5 to 6% of Americans do jobs like my dad did in factories. That means less than 10% of us do the stuff that people have done for all of human history. Well, what's happened? Our economy has pivoted. It's shifted. The new driver of economic wealth isn't raw materials, and it isn't physical labor power, and it isn't large concentrations of industry, especially in the advanced world. It's this. It's the human mind. Now, lots of people talked about that. Lots of people write about the growth of the knowledge economy, the growth of the post-industrial economy, the growth of the information economy. I struggled for this for a long time, for the early part of my career. What is happening? What's going on? And what came to me one day, I was watching little kids, and now I have 2 little kids of my own, play on a playground. And I said to myself, what was really true about human history before now? People use our physical productive capabilities to make things to make money, to drive productivity, and to grow and create a bigger, more prosperous society. What we shared in common was our human physical capability. And I looked at those kids and I said, what we really share in common is not just our physical capability. Every single human being is a creative being. What runs, and you heard it, it was right here. What runs the economy, what powers the economy now, is not our physical capability, it's not our strength, it's not what my dad did in a factory per se. It's our ability to use our mental faculties, but it's not the knowledge that we are taught, it's not the information that's poured into our head, it's not the technologies or the companies we create. What makes us meaningful humans, what separates us from all other species, is this creative component. Now, look, in the year 1900, most Americans were still employed on farms. A growing percentage of us were starting to work in factories. Less than 5% of Americans could be members of what I called the creative class. People who work in science, technology, management, healthcare, arts, culture, entertainment, design, the professions. By the year 1950, less than 10% of Americans worked on farms. More than 60 or 70% of us worked in manufacturing and factories and support activities. Less than 10% of us were members of the creative class. Beginning in 1980, the revolution starts. Today, the largest class of workers in Americans aren't people who work in factories, aren't people who work in hospitality and tourism and services. It's the creative class. In Montana, more than 40% of your economy is made up of this. In Bozeman, more than 45% of your economy. 50% of people in the Bozeman metro are college graduates. Think about that. My dad had a 7th grade education. 65% of people in the city of Bozeman. But what's important is you don't need a college degree to be members of the creative class. 40% of people who do creative work don't have a college degree. But here's the critically important thing. The creative class is not limited just to people who work in software, who have a creative business, work in entertainment. Every human being is creative. I didn't learn that from studying books. I didn't learn that from doing research. I learned that from my father. My dad's name was Louis Florida. He was the son of Italian immigrants. He took up work in a factory in Newark's ironbound section on the day he turned 13. He excused himself from the 7th grade. He got his working papers and went to work making, that's why I wear these eyeglass frames. Eyeglass frames just like this, but my dad's were much cooler. My dad worked in the factory so he could make striated aluminum temples and tack them on the side of these glasses just for him. He worked in that factory until Pearl Harbor was attacked. He put his tools down on the factory bench and he enlisted. He stormed the beaches at Normandy, and he fought in all the great battles of that war. He came back, he met my mom ice skating one day in Newark's Great Branchburg Park. They got married, and they had 2 boys. When I was a young kid, I was a precocious kid. I wanted to see what my dad did for a living. I wanted to see where he worked. So I would beg him, Daddy, 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 can you take me to the factory? And he said, no, Richard, you can't go to the factory. I work in this factory so you don't have to. It's your job to go to school and get a good education and get a career. And I was a pain in his ass. I would badger him, and on Saturdays, when the factory was running overtime, he'd relent. He said, if you come to the factory with me, I'll take you. If you do 2 things. If afterwards we can go to the Newark Public Library, and I'm a child of the 60s, I wanted to be a guitar player, and you will take an actual guitar lesson. And I agreed. We drove down that highway and we saw this giant factory, Victory Optical. The factory was amazing. It was these large brick buildings bounded by railroad tracks in Newark's ironbound section. And I'd enter that factory. My dad had worked his way up from a plant worker to a foreman. He now was the supervisor of all the workers in the factory, filled with Italian and Irish and German and Polish and African American and Puerto Rican workers. My dad talked to all of them. And I would be fascinated by the machines. I'd be looking at the machines. My dad said something I will never forget. Richard, it's not the machines that make this factory great. We got these machines over in Germany and over in Italy or wherever. We cobbled this together. me and your Uncle Mike and his cousin Mike and the workers here. What makes this factory, this is my dad with a 7th grade education, is the knowledge, it's the intelligence, it's the creativity of the people who work here. This is your mission. It's not just about building a creative class of high-tech, entrepreneurial, flashy businesses. It's about harnessing the creative capabilities of each and every person who work in extractive industries, mining industries, all of those industries, agricultural industries, on farms, in factories, making those products you just heard about. That's the key. How do we move the creative class from the 40 or 50 of us who have the great privilege to be members, find our identity, find our freedom, find our meaning, find our purpose, live our dreams? How do we encompass everyone? And here's the second part of it, which is so darn important. The old economy, its anchors or platforms are easy to understand. In the agricultural economy, the platform of that economy was the farm. It's where we organized human inputs and raw materials to make things. In the industrial economy, the fundamental platform of that economy was the large vertically integrated corporation. People lived and worked for life. And the factory. What's the platform of this economy? What did we just hear? Did we hear anything about farms or factories? A little bit. We have inputs, things we make. The fundamental platform of today's economy, a knowledge-driven, innovation-powered, creative economy, is your community. It's your community. And this challenges people. They don't get it. People in America still don't see it. The fundamental, it's not the cluster of company or the organization. It's the community you build. That community was what organizes human talent. It's what brings people together. It's what connects people. And that's what's driving people to Montana and Bozeman. When I wrote this book, Rise of the Creative Class, I said it's no longer enough to just attract. Before that, people just said, if you want to grow an economy, attract companies, bribe them to come, give them grants to come, give them tax rates to come. What I saw, living in places like Pittsburgh, is it didn't work. What moved the needle was attracting and mobilizing talented and creative and energized people. And why were people moving? Because they wanted to move to places where they could find identity, where they could find community, had qualities, and I called it, it's not quality of life, it's quality of place. What has God given you? Quality of place in abundance. The most incredible, the most spectacular, the most inspiring natural environment. But the natural environment is a necessary but in itself sufficient condition. Quality of place also comes with what you do with it. What do you do with that natural environment? What do you supplement it with? And in Montana and Bozeman, you've done remarkable arts, culture. And these are even arts, culture, entertainment, design. You think of them as associated with big cities like New York or LA or Paris or Berlin. Sure, they're important. But in terms of attracting talent and energizing talent, research shows with unequivocally that stuff is critical to the economic growth and innovative potential of smaller communities. Now, that was all there 20 years ago when I wrote Rise of the Creative Class, when I looked at more than 300 metropolitan areas. But you know what? Bozeman didn't show up. What's happened in the past decade? What's happened since I met Padden? What's happened in the past 5 years that's changed Montana and Bozeman? We could say it's the rise of the internet. We couldn't have had this conversation, right? People said that digital technology and internet was supposed to annihilate place, overcome distance. No, it's made place more important. You heard it. People are looking for places they can call home, find community, forge connection. You heard it. I didn't have to tell you that. The great experiment in remote work changed this country in the world in ways that we still don't understand. But I can tell you this, It has made place fundamentally more important than ever before in human history. It has made, I wrote a book called Who's Your City? I wrote it in 2008. I said the decision we make of where to live is the most important decision we make of all. I said, my dad told me, you heard that, go to school, get an education. You don't want to work in the darn factory, get a life. My mom said, don't listen to him. I actually went to high school. I dated guys who were doctors and lawyers, but I found somebody I truly loved. I married your father. We had you 2 boys. It's the greatest decision I ever made. We didn't have a lot of money, but who cares? So find that right partner. What they never told me is the place we choose to live structures all of those elements of our lives. Our professional networks, our personal networks, our career opportunities, the educational environment, the networks and people and community we give to our children. Nobody cared. And then the pandemic struck. And every single time where should I live? Where should I go? How do I go? What kind of community should I live in? How do I find something that fits me? The rise of remote work gave us an incredible freedom. See, what happened was, since the Industrial Revolution, before the Industrial Revolution, we lived and worked in the same place. On a farm, in a factory, over the shop. But with the Industrial Revolution, we pulled and pulled and pulled and pulled that apart. We lived in a suburb, a new word, an invented word, a suburb, a dormitory suburb with bedrooms where we slept, and we got in a car and we drove to a factory or a headquarters where we worked. And people began to say that life is horrible. It's horrible. We are humans. This is in our DNA. We were striving to reintegrate these pulled apart parts of ourselves. We want to reintegrate where we live and work, and with new technology, we can do that locally. That's why the choice of place becomes so important. But what's the flip side? What's the paradox? What's the contradiction? What's the dialectic? Is we have to connect further afield. Every one of those businesses wouldn't survive if they were just dependent on the local market. The internet and digital technology creates the capacity for people and for cities and communities to connect. And so what we are building is whole new kinds of communities. Communities which are local and global, which are physical and digital at the same time. It's not enough. I love Toronto. I love that city. We live in a spectacular neighborhood, in a ravine, in a forest in the city. My kids walk to school. Toronto is a great global city, but it's losing ground. It's losing ground to places like London and New York, but also cities I'm not that fond of, like Dubai and Singapore. New cities. Why? Because it's no longer enough. The subtitle of The Rise of the Creative Class and why it's important and how we create new communities to live, work, and play. Those are all still critical. But the most important part of the communities we're building today, and you heard it before me. Yes, it has to be a great place to live. Yes, it has to be a great place to work. Yes, it has to be a great community for my family. Yes, there has to be stuff I like to do. But connect. Live, work, play, and if I could write that book over in bold letters in capital, connect. Connectivity is the single, you know what? We got confused. We thought of places as places to live and work. And then we said, yeah, and my good friends at MIT and Harvard wrote a whole essay, The Playground City. It's a spectacular metaphor. Yes, a city should be a playground, not just a workplace. It should be a place to have fun. And increasingly, we do work when we're having fun. We don't just work in a factory like my dad did. We have fun. We go for walks. We get involved in sports. But the real role of a place, of a community, of a city all along has been connecting people. What places are? And this comes from the greatest urbanist of all time, the late Jane Jacobs, who was my mentor and idol. A nice woman from Scranton, New Jersey, who said, and actually, Robert Lucas, when he won his Nobel Prize in economics, said, he wrote an essay on what drives economic progress. He said, it's not what economists have thought. There was a woman, she doesn't have a PhD. She's not a trained economist. Her name was Jane Jacobs. She figured it out. When we come together in places and get together and connect with one another and mix and match and combine and recombine, he called it a human capital externality, an externality that comes from people connecting. Steve Jobs said it about Apple. What made Silicon Valley great was the fact that he could find Wozniak and find others and combine and recombine until he made a great company. Jack White, the great guitar player, said that about Detroit. What made Detroit a great music scene was the ability of people to form and combine and recombine into bands until some were successes. What makes human beings productive is when we come to places, we forge community. Connection is key. We want identity. We want community. We want home. We want connectivity. So thinking about this connectivity is really crucial. Now, when I was growing up in Newark, New Jersey, I lived through what people called the urban crisis firsthand. One day when I was a little boy, trying to be the next Jimi Hendrix, not unsuccessfully, my dad was driving me to my guitar lesson. It was a hot summer in July in the late 1960s. And we heard gunfire, and my dad said, get down on the floor of his 1960-something Chevy Impala. I got down on the floor. I could see smoke billowing. I could see buildings on fire. A National Guardsman came and pulled us over and said, "Sir, turn the car around. Newark's engaged in riots, civil disturbance, civil disobedience. Black people weren't going to take anymore what was being put to them." The old urban crisis was a crisis of urban decay, urban dysfunction, of corporations, factories, and the middle class leaving older cities for suburbs. But today we're involved in a different kind of crisis. Now, people talk about, well, it's expensive in New York, it's expensive in San Francisco, it's expensive in Boulder, it's getting expensive in Nashville. This is a crisis of success, and it's hitting you. I remember I was invited by the Walton kids, Tom and Stuart, to Bentonville to give a talk to them on how they could turn Bentonville into more of an exciting community. I think the fact was they didn't want to be like Amazon. They didn't want to move the corporate headquarters. Amazon was now searching for the second headquarters. They wanted to keep the headquarters right there in their hometown of Bentonville. And I listened to their agenda, and I worked with them on their agenda, and I said, if you're successful with this agenda in Bentonville, Arkansas, I said, you will see housing prices skyrocket. You will see affordability become an issue. And they started laughing hysterically. They said, "You're nuts. We love you, Richard, but you're nuts." 3 years later, I was called back to Bentonville to do their affordable housing strategy. You are in the throes of this. What is a house now? Almost $1 million? I looked at the data, maybe not exact, getting close to $1 million. I'm sure in certain neighborhoods in Bozeman, even more. I think you were named Montana. Can you imagine this? Based on a cost-to-income basis, the most unaffordable state in the country. I mean, when I read that, as a kid from New Jersey, I was shocked. 50% of your I heard the $200 remark. I thought I was good when I went to Ohio State. When I was a professor at Ohio State, I paid $450 for an apartment, $200 for an apartment. That apartment's now $2,500 roughly. Your housing costs have outdistanced your incomes by 3x. You've got to understand that this kind of desire, what you offer, is so attractive that it's attracting so many people that you can't keep up. So you've got to build, and you're doing great stuff there. I mean, Patton and others doing great stuff. You've got to build more. You've got to build more affordable. You got to create more spaces. You got a multifamily. You can't just be single family. Multifamily apartments, but for families, bigger ones with more space for your tourism and hospitality industry. So you've got to deal with that. And you've got to make this as a place that everyone, I don't want to belabor this with Jane Jacobs. She was so brilliant. I asked her this question when she was still alive about what was then going on and where Patton used to live, Brooklyn and Soho. She said to me something really interesting. And if you remember one thing from this talk, remember this. She said, "Richard, when a place gets boring, even the rich people leave." when a place gets boring. So all of the things that draw people, the excitement, the arts and culture, the access to nature, the ability to find identity, once a place gets expensive, go. I know Gordon's from Aspen. I want to pick on Aspen. I spend the winter in Miami Beach. I mean, these are places that are becoming places for only the truly rich. There's just an article on Miami Beach. Houses over $50 million are selling like hotcakes. Nothing else is selling. This is what you don't want to happen. You want a place that can harness and energizes creativity of anyone. All right. I'm writing a new book. And it comes from this idea of what digital technology is doing to our cities. And this is really important for you. For all of human history, cities were physical clusters. They were places we lived and worked and did things, and then we traveled from them. Digital technology appears to contradict that. It actually appears to say, no, you don't need to live in a city anymore. We can spread out. Tom Friedman has written about this in The World is Flat, major magazine stories. You can live by the lake, you can live by the mountains, you can go anywhere. Cities are going to decline, they're going to decay, New York's going to fall apart. No, bullshit. New York housing prices are rising fast. San Francisco is coming through a powerful comeback. London is still a financial center of the world. What digital technologies allow cities to do is expand in a new way. Like the horse-drawn carriage or the electric streetcar or the automobile allowed cities to expand at their periphery. Digital technologies allow cities to expand in a new way by connecting to other cities. We've done the data, we have the maps. Miami is a satellite of New York. Austin is a satellite of San Francisco. Nashville is a satellite of LA. For you, it means understanding not just what the Montana economy is, and not just what the Bozeman economy is. What are the places you are critically connected to? In this hub, and it's like the hub and spoke system of airports. What are the places? I heard them. I heard Brooklyn. I heard Boulder. I've heard Denver. I've heard San Francisco. What are the places, and there are data in LinkedIn and other places to look at, what are the places? Yes, of course it's about building a Montana economy. Yes, of course it's about building a Bozeman and all the other great communities that are here. But how do you build that economy in light of all the well, look, I'm a professor, which means I come from the Fidel Castro School of Public Speaking, which means I could literally keep you here all day. But that little clock near the wall tells me that, and I want to talk with Pat, and I just want to say again, congratulations on everything you've achieved. And not just congratulations. You've put in process a really incredible model. I love what you're doing, and I only hope that I can come back and see you guys again and be of help. So thanks for listening. I look forward to a little conversation with Adam. Thank you, guys. Thank you.
Amazing. Thank you, Richard. Amazing. Brother.
We gonna sit?
No. Do you have time, or do we got to get you to the airport?
Yeah, I got time.
All right, let's do it.
Minutes.
All right,
let's do it.
Amazing. All right, we have time for just a couple quick questions.
Sorry, just a second.
Oh, you're good.
Yeah, we're good. Yeah, do a question or two.
Yeah.
I mean, I do have a 2:16 flight, but it's not that far. I have little kids like him, and Dad's been away for one sleep, which is
exactly
hard on them.
Go ahead. Yes, Elliot.
Yeah, Richard, huge fan of what you said about what we're doing, and I re-engineered your tech tolerance, index.
This is great.
And I found that Bozeman was way at the bottom of the list for tolerance, Montana in general, but the biggest comp I could find is Boulder, which is like number one. I think, what do we need to do to try to drive up, now that we're a metropolitan, to the top?
I think there's two things. One, I think what I said, it's not such about tolerance per se. Technology, talents, and tolerance, a little equation I made in my book. It's about valuing the creative contributions of everyone. And I think that's really critical. And I think you're doing that, and you have to do more on that. The other thing I was going to say, which is really interesting, I just finished a big report on Tulsa, a place that you wouldn't really think of. And it's a way they dealt with tolerance. Tulsa was really declining terribly as a center for oil and gas. And the fellow named George Kaiser, son of Holocaust survivors, made billions of dollars and pledged to give it all back to the town that created something for him. And he started programs like Head Start, working for disadvantaged kids, helping the lowest income neighborhoods. And they reinvented economic development. This is important for you guys, and for tolerance, and for the least advantaged, and making something inclusive. He didn't go at the economy for building an innovation district. He didn't go at the economy for building new jobs. He didn't go at the economy for building a high-tech hub. He said in his foundation, which he put in the community foundation, he didn't create a separate foundation to aggrandize. He made it a part of the Tulsa Community Foundation. Everything we do should build opportunity for Tulsans. If we build an innovation economy and build a tech hub and get a Biden Tech Hub grant, that's great. But it should be about lifting up the bottom. It should be about not just making great high-tech jobs. I think that's the key now. Everything you do should be something that builds up Bozeman, and I called it, you can't do, Bozeman doesn't work, I called it Tulsa-ness. What was the key to their success was Tulsa-ness, focusing on how Tulsa grows as a community, not just how tech industries or innovation industries, how that whole thing becomes cohesive and inclusive. One more, you think?
One more. Let's do one more. What do we got?
I thought you had the question.
Oh, I mean, I've got 100 questions.
I thought you had the question.
I've got one for you. We've got one of the things I think about a lot, and we've discussed a lot, is this idea of the Montanan diaspora.
Yes.
You have for so long the shorthand that every governor we've had has said for too long our greatest export has been our children. The good news about that was for a long time we exported our children. And because of remote work, a lot of us came home. But a lot of us who started families in Seattle or San Francisco or New York, they are in those superstar cities as some of the best job creators in the world. How should we think about engaging that diaspora?
Well, you said it. You said it to your dad. You said it to the audience. And I said there are 3 big moves in my book, Who's Your City? There's that, and the first move when you graduate college, you're going to go to a superstar city. If you're smart, you're going to go to a place with lots of economic opportunity, not just a great labor market. You want to go to a place with a great mating market because you want to meet somebody great who's a partner, right? That's it. And now I say every kid in America goes to New York. Yeah, some go to LA, but literally every kid I know goes to New York City. The next big move is when you have a family. And look, I had a family late in life, but I will tell you what keeps me up at night. I'm going to use a swear word. My kids wouldn't like it. What the fuck is home? What is it? I mean, I'm weighing up at night. Is it Toronto? And I don't think so. Is it Miami Beach? No. Is it New Jersey? No. You're lucky you have home. So I think the answer to that is 2 things. If there's a place that's home for people, that's going to be a draw for lots of them. If there's family, if there's grandma and grandpa, if there's siblings, and yeah, we see more and more of that. You see it happening all across the country because digital technology allows you to reintegrate your life. You don't necessarily work. You might do some work in Montana, but you work lots of places. So I think that draw of home, but the other flip side of that is how do you then make Bozeman and Montana home for the others? Mm-hmm. This is really important, right? How do the new people forge connection and find, I think, this is the single most important question of our time. And how do we end up getting out of our bubble? How do we end up, if you look now around America, you could almost look, every one of these places has their little bubble of kinds of types of people. One of the things you hear people say, especially who move from big cities to smaller towns, the best thing I did was get out of that bubble. I'm now in a community with real people who are different than me. And I think the other part of it is, as you attract back the diaspora, how do you connect them? Marissa and others said this. How do they connect? How are those connections forged? How are they contributing? Look at you. What are the ways in which those, because it's not enough just to work and to raise your kids. Those are probably 3/4 of it or 4/5 of it, but there's an additional part that's about contributing. Yeah. How do I contribute? How do I give back? How do I start to build something that reflects what I can do? And I think those are the absolute critical things to making the kind of community that can be exciting and resilient attract people and doesn't get boring. Anyway, I mean, I hope I can help. I mean, I'd love to be able to help.
I
you with
would
this.
love to work with you. I think we have an opportunity to say, the joke I always say is like we should have a sandwich board table out on the Yellowstone Club tarmac or at BZN and say, welcome home. What can we do to help welcome you home? And what are you going to do to help the community? We have to
and
have
I'm speaking, by the way, I'm speaking at Detroit Homecoming in September. So I don't know if you do that here.
We don't do that. We should do that.
So two examples, Campus Philly, a long-holding thing where they organized the college kids and they created Campus Philly for young people. But Detroit for 10 years now has had Detroit Homecoming. And they bring together, and Detroit, you look around, you could almost look at, I think sometimes more than half of all professional sports owners are from Detroit. You look around and you go, the Detroit families are like, why, the kids, the experts. Yeah, I think something like a Montana or Bozeman Homecoming is a place to start.
Well, we have a great organization called Montana Ambassadors that I sit on the board of, and that's kind of tracking and engaging with that diaspora in these other places. But I think bringing them home, bringing folks home, and then those who have to stay somewhere, if they're already there, what I always joke is send the remote job home without the person attached to the suitcase.
Remember, there's a great young woman, I'll see her next week. She's at the University of California, Berkeley. She was studying Silicon Valley. Her name's Annalise Exanian. And she said the most important thing in a vibrant tech hub is not brain drain or brain gain, it's brain circulation. So your diaspora, it's not only home.
Yeah.
Even if they live away, they want to be connected to home.
Exactly.
And so think of it not just as a pole. Of course you want a pole. As a circulation, you constantly, in another place, Toronto. You want to look at the most important diaspora for America, film and entertainment, finance and real estate. There are hidden Canadians all over this country, and you only know that if you're an American who lives in Toronto. I can tell you now, people talk about rich people buying homes in Miami Beach. Go to the Sunset Islands, look at the waterfront houses. 3/5 of them are owned by people from Toronto. So the diaspora is not just somebody in, it's how do you leverage all the capable, do you call them Montanans?
Yeah.
And what do you call them, Bosemanites?
Bosemanites, yeah.
Is that right?
Yeah.
No, it's not.
Yeah, that's what it is.
I did pretty good. Montanans and Bosemanites. I think thinking about how you leverage them where they are as well. Anyway, thanks, brother. Thanks for bringing me.
I love you. Thank you for coming.
Love you too.
Richard, Florida, everybody. Thank you, man.